Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Big Tent USA. Thank you for joining us for this special training with VoteRiders. And we're so pleased to welcome back Sylvester Johnson, the third from VoteRiders, joining us today. I just want to say that since the fall of Roe on Friday, sorry, still emotional, still angry. It feels really good to join together as a community to take some action. We know that helping citizens engage in the political process is essential right now. And I think we all see daily what happens when so many of Americans are not engaging. So with that, Big Tent USA is a national women-led pro-democracy organization, and we promote civic engagement through activism and education. Our upcoming events include our spotlight speaker on Wednesday, July 13th at 7 with renowned journalist and author Michael Lewis. His most recent books are The Fifth Risk and The Premonition, and he will be discussing those books. We will give away one, your choice, to the first 100 registrants. So please sign up for that. It's on the website and in the chat. On Wednesday, August 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Dan Pfeiffer, founder of Crooked Media, Pod Save America, Vote Save America, will join us to discuss his new book, Battling the Big Lie, How Fox, Facebook, and the MAGA media are destroying America. That's a light title if there ever was one. We will be giving away 50 books to the first, we will be giving away books to the first 50 registrants. We are so happy to have Sylvester Johnson, the third of VoteRiders, join us again today. Sylvester is the National Volunteer Manager. That's my dog in the background, so I'm sorry about that. The National Volunteer Manager and Georgia Voter ID Coalition Coordinator for VoteRiders. Georgia born and raised, Sylvester's civic engagement began in high school when he worked with organizations such as Special Olympics of Georgia. After graduating from Howard University, Sylvester returned to his home state and served as the political director for Carolyn Bourdeaux's campaign for Congress in Georgia's 7th Congressional District in 2018. Now, as the National Volunteer Manager and great friend of Big Tent, Sylvester is excited to apply his passion for civic engagement by helping further VoteRiders' mission to ensure that all citizens are able to exercise their right to vote. So Sylvester is going to be giving us a PowerPoint presentation. If you were with us last week for the Tent Talk with Sylvester, some of this will be a review for you, but so many new people are joining us today that we thought it was really important to ground us in the important work of why voter ID can be such a hurdle to so many Americans. So please bear with us, and then Sylvester will get into writing the letters. And before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you, because we have sent out over 3,000 letters already. So this is great work, and we are very happy. We're so honored to be with all of you today, writing letters with VoteRiders. So with that, I'll let you take it away, Sylvester, and thanks everyone for coming.
Awesome. Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Vanessa, for having me here this morning. So excited to speak with all the Big Tent volunteers. And as Kitty just mentioned, you've all already checked out 3,000 letters and are about to have those going into some of our key target states. And so I'm looking forward to doing this training with you, answering any questions you have. If you have those, please drop those in the chat. Hopefully we get those answered throughout the presentation, but after that, we'll still stay to answer more of your questions. And so you can continue to have that impact, make sure we're having that effect and making sure voters are prepared across the United States, but in those key states that you all will be targeting this election cycle. So again, we're going to jump into the presentation. I'm joined also by my colleague Olivia. She's going to be doing the slides. She's also the one of our national volunteer managers here, doing some great work at VoteRiders. And so with that, we can get underway. As you're seeing, this is our title screen about our letter writing campaigns that we do here at VoteRiders, that we're glad that Big Tent USA is partnering with us on today. And so just a little background information about VoteRiders. We've been an organization for 10 years. We actually had our 10-year anniversary back in April, where we kicked off some of our great letter writing over 30,000 letters in that month. We had a goal originally of 10,000, but we passed that. And now with Big Tent aboard and the work that you've already done, it looks like we're going to continue to reach new goals and have that impact. Of course, we are a nonpartisan organization, so that means anyone who needs voter ID assistance reaching out to us that we engage with, someone that may receive your letters, we're going to talk them through that process, make sure that they have the ID they need, have the supporting documents, and that they're prepared to participate in upcoming elections. One reason why this is possible is because we do this work nationwide in every state, even if it's not a voter ID state. We want to make sure that folks have the ID that they need. And this work is fueled by over 1,000 plus partners nationwide, like Big Ten, and then over 8,000 plus volunteers like yourself that make sure that we're able to have this impact. And so our big goal this month and every time we're writing is 10,000 letters into our target states. Again, as Kitty mentioned, you all have already signed out 3,000 letters. So we're pretty close to that goal with some of the other work we've been doing throughout the month of June for Pride Month. And so I'm so thankful for you all in that participation. Our target states that you will be writing to as Big Ten volunteers is Arizona and Florida. We also have Georgia, Texas, and Wisconsin, and I believe you'll be focused on a few of those states later in the election cycle. And so this is why the letters that you're sending out are so important, and make sure that folks are prepared to have that voice. Over 25 million plus voting age American citizens don't have a current government issued photo ID. So if you live in a state like Florida, if you live in a state like Arizona, where you're writing to, that can hinder you from being part of the voting process. Having that ID is so key outside of voting as well, because it helps you make sure that you're able to secure housing, make sure that you're able to get a job. And so we want to empower folks and remove those hurdles from them so that they can live that everyday life and have it a little easier and remove some of that strain. So disproportionately impacted by voter ID laws. These are folks we've seen through our work, whether that's sending letters, the people that we engage with on our chat bot, the folks that our partners send to us as leads, people we meet on the ground. These are folks we work with the most, whether it's Black voters, Hispanic voters, women voters who may have had an acceptable ID, but if they ever changed their name, what's on their ID may not match what's on the voter rolls. Voters with disabilities, younger voters, and student voters who never had an acceptable form of ID in their state. Voters 65 and plus who may have had a driver's license, or a state ID, which is the most common form of ID in any voter ID state, but they no longer have that because they may not drive. Transgender and non-binary voters who we've been engaging with a lot throughout Pride Month, and we continue to work with Indigenous voters and the AAPI community. So when you're writing these letters to these target states, these are the folks that are going to make up the voter list that you're receiving. We're going to get this great information about VoteRiders and then hopefully reach out to us or prepare themselves to make sure that they are ready to participate in upcoming elections. And so the reason why we do this work is because we want to tamp down on confusion. There's so many reasons why confusion is widespread, and these are just some of them. One reason is because these laws are constantly changing. We've seen a lot of that take place since after 2020. We'll talk about some of the changes we've seen since the presidential election. And so we want to make sure that whenever those change, we're updating the information on our website, updating our info cards that we send up, updating the letterhead that you're using to make sure that you're reaching out to these voters. And then voter ID laws can be different, whether you're voting in person or voting by mail. And however somebody chooses to make sure they want to have their voice heard, how to cast that ballot, they know how to successfully do so. And lastly, poll workers are just like me and you. Sometimes they may be confused about the laws or not aware of all the acceptable forms of ID. So we love to outfit the voters with that information. So if they run into any issues, they know how to navigate that process, make sure they're able to cast that ballot. And so these are some of the numbers we were discussing about the changes we've seen across the board. Over 90 plus bills in 30 plus states have been introduced since 2021 to restrict voting. And since June of 2022, over 24 states have enacted new or stricter voter ID laws that impact folks in that state. And folks are continuing to put forward these laws and continuing to see this change. So again, that's why VoteRiders make sure our information on our website is always correct. The information on the letterhead that you're sending is always correct, because we want people to be knowledgeable about what those ID laws are in their state and how to navigate them. And so now what you're seeing on your screen is the voter ID laws across the United States. So we're going to go through this quickly and talk about what this map actually means. So if you look at the states that are in the lightest color green, states like California or Nevada, these are no voter ID states. So after you participate in your first federal election, you should not be asked to show ID when you go to the polls. If you look at states in the medium color green states like Texas, states like Florida, one of those states you'll be writing to, those are non-strict voter ID states. So what that means is they may accept student IDs, they may accept out-of-state IDs, they may accept expired IDs. It just depends state by state, as you can tell by the different colors on the map. And then we move to the strict voter ID states that are in the dark green states like Arizona, states like Georgia, where I'm from. Arizona, you'll be writing to today, and as a Big Ten volunteer, these states, you need some form of photo ID to participate. So our key states and the work we do on the ground, of course, the work we do on the ground is supported by the letters that you send. Those letters, of course, go a long way to making sure that voters in that state are prepared, but they also connect us with folks that are part of the community, whether that's another democracy organization, whether that's a community organization like a shelter, a community center. Folks on the ground, it helps build our footprint in those states and support the work that our staff on the ground in those states are doing. So when you're sending those letters to Florida, you'll see in the right-hand corner a young lady named Jaslyn. She has on the same VoteRiders shirt I have on. It supports the work that she does in the state of Florida. It supports the work that we're doing in Arizona as well to make sure that we're building that footprint, making sure that folks know about VoteRiders, know how to reach out to VoteRiders if they have any questions or if they need help getting supporting documents or that ID that they need. And so here's a great story about how these letters are being impactful. Who you're seeing on your screen now is a man named Keith. He lives in the state of Georgia. I know Keith personally because I met him at the DDS. That's what we call the DMV here in Georgia. But Keith, we met him. He needed help getting an ID. He needed help paying for that document. And of course, VoteRiders covers the cost of the supporting documents, whether it's a birth certificate. It covers the ride they get to and from the DMV, and then it covers the cost of that ID or that state's driver's license. So when I met Keith at the DDS, I asked him how he heard about VoteRiders. And so he shuffled through all the papers he had, his supporting documents, his proof of residency, but he also pulled out a letter written by one of our great volunteers. He said, "This is how I heard about VoteRiders." He brought that with him to the DDS, and that's what you're seeing there on the screen. He said, "That's how I heard about you all. That's why I reached out to get the support." And so this just proves no matter which state you're riding to, these are folks that we're targeting that need assistance, that may need help, and it is getting to them, and then they are reaching out to VoteRiders to get that assistance so that they can be prepared for upcoming elections. Because when I was speaking to Keith, as we were waiting for his Uber to come back and take him back home, he said, "Now that I have my ID, I'm going to make sure that I can apply for housing, but I'm also going to vote in the upcoming primaries." And so that's what these are doing. This is what they're going to be doing in Arizona and Florida and across the board. And so, of course, our goal with this letter writing campaign is to make sure that voters in these key states know exactly what ID they need to vote. And if they don't have that ID, or if they have any questions, they know they can reach out to VoteRiders for that assistance. And of course, as I mentioned, we help them through that process free of charge. We never want a financial issue to be a burden and a reason why they're not able to vote. So now let's kind of get into what you'll need to be part of this letter writing campaign, be part of this process. When you're crafting these letters, you'll need your favorite writing utensil, whether that's a pen, marker, color pencil, crayon, the pre-printed letterhead with the voter ID information. That's very key. We ask that you send all of your letters that you send on behalf of VoteRiders through that letterhead, just because, again, it has all that key information about voter ID laws in that state, and then it has that contact information for VoteRiders. Stamps and envelopes, that's very key as well, because we always thank volunteers for stepping up in that capacity, making sure that these letters get out the door and get to the folks that need them the most. And so we're, again, thankful that our volunteers step up in that way. And then you won't need the voter letters link. Big Ten is unique. You will be going through a common link that Vanessa or Kitty has already shared with you to request those addresses and continue writing to the voters. And so now let's talk about the platform. Olivia, we can skip this slide. This slide talks about the invitation, but again, voter letters or Big Tent will be going through their one setup, but this is the dashboard. Again, you won't be seeing this dashboard when you're writing Again, you'll be going through Kitty or Vanessa to check out those addresses, but this is our platform, Voter Letters, very easy to navigate. When you request addresses, again, this is something that the Big Tent team will be doing. You'll ask them whenever you want to request. They have a trove of those. We already mentioned that you have started writing over 3,000 letters to make sure that folks are prepared in these key states. Let's click to the next slide, this one. So this one is important for the folks at Big Tent because the way that you'll be receiving your letters from Big Tent is in that PDF format. Like you would have seen on some of the previous slides, this slide, the PDFs have all the key information that you'll need to make sure that these letters get out the door. It's going to have the voter's name, it's going to have their address, the city, the zip, everything you need to address that envelope. What's key about the PDF version is there's a QR code at the bottom of each PDF page. And so we ask, as you're writing these letters, making sure that these get out the door to the voters, once you've completed writing to everybody on that list, we ask you to scan that QR code at the bottom. What that's going to do is it's going to take you back to the Voter Letters platform, and that's going to allow you to mark that those voters have been written to, and we can check them as complete. That is key just because it makes us aware of the output that Big Tent is having, how many of those letters have been sent out the door, and how many we continue to write. And so that QR code is going to be unique to every page. So if you check out 40 or 60 voters and there's more than one PDF page that you receive, make sure you scan each of those QR codes upon completing that page. And again, I believe you can reach out to Kitty or Vanessa once you completed writing to those folks as well, and that will allow you to make sure that those voters are marked as receiving a letter. And so let's talk about what you need to write on your letters to these voters. Again, when you look at the letterhead, it has all that essential information, the voter ID laws, how to reach out to VoteRiders. At the top is where we ask you to add that unique, it can be as short as you want, or it can be as long as one. You can flip it over, draw a picture, continue writing, however you think is best to engage with that voter. So if you want to say something like your vote is important, if you want to say something like make sure your ID ready, make sure you're prepared for the upcoming primaries or election, that is what you can incorporate into those letters. You can highlight some of the VoteRiders key information, some of our contact information at the bottom, just so you know how to reach out to VoteRiders so that they can ask us any questions they may have around voter ID, and so they're prepared. So again, that's how you make it unique. Of course, you can address that voter by name, address that voter by friend, address that voter as Arizona voter, however you feel comfortable addressing that letter to the person you're writing to. And so just a friendly reminder, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are a nonpartisan organization. So we encourage you to make that letter unique, make it pop out, make that voter want to engage with it, because that handwritten aspect is what makes them engage with the letter. When they see that it's addressed, the envelope is addressed in handwriting, that piques their interest. And then when they open the letter, they see more handwriting. That is what makes them engage with that letter as well. When we've seen through research that other folks have done, that letter writing is a very impactful way to engage with voters, more than text banking, phone banking, because sometimes that can swamp up their phone. And so when you have that handwritten note, it's just so key. But when you're writing those notes, make sure you don't use any language or symbols that can be deemed partisan or offensive. And so again, what you're seeing now on your screen is a sample letter. This volunteer decided to write a little more on their letter. You can write just as much as them, just as little, draw a picture. Again, it's however you feel comfortable, however you want to address these letters and make sure they get out the door. One thing that's key on this page is voteriders.org/letter info. That's going to have some key information as you go through the letter writing process that leads you back to the VoteRiders website so that you can find some things like a sample letter that's going to help you while you're writing. And again, speaking about voteriders.org/letter info, when you go to that, you'll find information for all the key states that we're writing to. So you'll find that information for Florida, find that information for Arizona. It's going to have key dates, so key election dates like upcoming primary dates, a last day to register, first day to early vote, things of that nature. Again, you'll find a sample letter crafted for each of those states that can help you through that letter writing process. The return addresses for the states that you're writing to, that is going to be different, whether you're writing to Florida or Arizona, and we want to make sure that you have that correct. And so again, all that great information will be at voteriders.org/letter info if you need to check that out throughout your letter writing process. And so again, to speak about the return address, this is key. We just asked you to add this to every letter that you send out on behalf of VoteRiders. What you're seeing now on the picture on the right-hand side of your screen, that is the return address we use for when we're writing to Georgia. The reason why we have these return addresses and they're unique to each state is because we want to track any of the envelopes that get returned. We have volunteers that log that, and that's because if we're not able to reach them via letter, we want to try to contact them in another outreach form, whether that may be text banking or phone banking. So we do ask you to add that to every letter that you send out, just so that we can keep a log of all those that do not make it to the voter. And awesome. And spreading the word is so critical. That's how we find great partners like Big Tent. That's how we increase our volunteer base, have folks engaged. And so one way that you can do that is following us at VoteRiders across all the platforms, whether that's TikTok. We just started our TikTok, if any of you are on there, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And that just allows you to show some of the work that we've been doing, some of our posts, some of our infographics. But we also love to get great pictures of our volunteers. You'll see some of those on the screen, taking selfies. They take pictures of the stacks of letters that they sent out, just to show the impact, share it with your network. And that helps them say, hey, they're working with VoteRiders. It seems like a great organization. I want to be part of some of this work they're doing. And so we get to build that volunteer base, get more folks working, engaging with more voters, and we're able to assist more people ahead of upcoming elections. And this is just an important note when you're taking those selfies, when you're taking those pictures of stacks of letter, or you're about to put them in the mailbox. Just make sure that whenever you do that, that the voter's information is not in that picture. Make sure it's either blurred out or far enough in the picture that it can't be seen. We want your pictures to go viral. We want it to go across social media, engage with your network, but we don't want that voter's contact information to go viral. So that's just something to be aware of when you are taking those pictures and reposting them and sharing them with Big Tent and VoteRiders as well. And so this slide just speaks about some ways that other folks decide to step up. We are so thankful for folks that step up and dedicate their time. Some folks decide that they want to support in other ways, and these are some of the price points that make that possible. I always like to use the $50 mark, ordering a birth certificate for folks, because again, VoteRiders helps folks throughout that voter ID process. So if they need supporting documents like a birth certificate, we cover the cost of that as well. That's usually around $50 when we are working with the platform that we use. So that's going to make sure that one of the voters that receive a letter from a volunteer is able to get that birth certificate if they need that, and have that as one of the supporting documents when they go to the DMV to get that ID or driver's license. And so lastly, please make sure that you keep in touch with VoteRiders so you can show us some of the work you're doing. When again, tag us on social media at VoteRiders across all of those great platforms. VoteRiders.org/volunteer. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up. That's going to be great because you'll get key updates about other letter writing parties that we may have. Other ways that you can volunteer with VoteRiders, if you like text banking, we have helpline and chatbot assistance, virtual voter ID assistance opportunities. There's so many ways that you can have an impact. Make sure that voters are prepared, and to make sure that you receive any of those updates, make sure you sign up on the VoteRiders website so you can get that. And then lastly, volunteer at voteriders.org. That is key as well, just because me, Olivia, our friend Nathan, we are checking that mailbox constantly, following up with any volunteers that may have questions about the letter writing process, questions about other ways that they can engage with VoteRiders. So if you ever have any questions or need to speak with us, feel free to shoot us an email, and we will definitely get back to you all as soon as possible.
Great. Thanks so much, Sylvester. We really appreciate it. We do have some great questions in the chat, so I'm going to go to those questions. Carolyn was asking, do you guys do you have data to track the efficacy of letter writing?
Yes, we, as I mentioned, some of the data that we have, maybe not specific numbers, but we've read research and things that said letter writing is one of the most potent and most effective ways of doing outreach to voters. Again, because it has that unique handwritten address on the front that makes them engage with, and then you have that handwriting on the inside. It's been proven to be more effective than text banking and phone, just because folks, especially as you get closer and closer to the election, they're starting to receive a lot of text messages, and if they don't know that number, they may filter it out, especially as well when they're receiving those phone calls that start becoming more and more numerous as you get closer to November. And so receiving those handwritten letters, they go a long way, because it's not just a mailer or an info mailer that they receive from campaigns and things of that nature. So they have been proven to be very impactful. We talked about the story about Keith, how I met him at the DDS here in Georgia. It goes a long way to making sure that we're contacting and reaching out to those voters, and that they feel confident that they can reach back out to VoteRiders for that assistance or any questions they may have.
Yeah, and I remember when Scott Foreman came back to speak to Big Tent. He's the ED at Vote Forward, and they had done some good data collection, and they did peel some margins. They got some people who hadn't voted to vote, and as we all know, these elections are all about the margin. So, and the handwritten piece was absolutely essential to getting the people to open that letter and act and vote. So, it does sound like for a lot of people the letter is really key. And so Zachary wants to know why the decision to send letters immediately rather than time them for sending on a specific day, say 10 or 12 days prior to the election, or 30 days to targeted elections in case of new ID needed. And I know there are primaries coming up too, so.
Yes, I specifically in Florida and Arizona, where you're writing to, those primaries are approaching in August. The reason why we want to send those as soon as possible, because voter ID is a different process from voter registration, from GOTV, making sure that folks go and cast that ballot. Folks start at different places, as we mentioned. Some folks need that birth certificate. They start all the way at the beginning, so we have to order that. You never know how long that may take for that voter to receive that birth certificate. They need other supporting documents like proof of residency in certain states. And so making sure that they're able to acquire all those materials to get that ID, we want to send out these letters as soon as possible, just so we can begin that process with that voter, make sure that they're prepared for primaries or elections in November. So that's why we ask you to send them out as soon as possible, so that folks are prepared. And if they need that assistance, we have time to navigate that process with them.
Yeah, Alicia did, she highlighted the fact that I think the deadline to register to vote in the Arizona primary is the 5th of July. So our letters may or may not reach them in time for the primary, but hopefully would get them primed and ready to get their ID in order to vote in November. So, we're coming in at this a little bit late in Arizona. Big Tent is not VoteRiders, but obviously it does sound like to navigate the whole voter ID landscape, people need time, right? They need time to, as you say, get money, get the ride, get the right ID, and then register. So, we're going to do this. We're doing this as in as timely a response as we possibly can, for sure. Zachary had another great question, which is how are addresses obtained identified as disproportionately impacted voters? Like, how do you sort of zero in on those voters who need more help than others?
Fantastic. And so as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we had that list of folks we know who are disproportionately impacted by voter ID laws. And so we get those numbers from different sources. For Florida and for Arizona specifically, we use a system called VAN. VAN stands for Voter Activation Networks. And so that is a voter tool that nonpartisan organizations are able to access to have those voter lists. And what we do is we go and craft unique lists that have those demographics, whether it's minority voters, women voters, younger voters, voters 65 and plus. We put that all in the system, and then it spits out a list of voters. We may also add things that say voters that participated in an election 4 years ago, but didn't participate in the upcoming election, because that's also an indicator that they may not have an acceptable form of ID or may lack something that they need. And so we put all these different filters into the van, and that spits out a list to us, and that is the voters that you'll write to. In other key states, states like Georgia, states like Texas, we have list where, for example, this list in Texas, these are folks that ballots were rejected during the primary. So we're writing to them because we know that they had an issue when they were voting. In Georgia, we have a list of folks that are deemed registered voters, but they don't have an ID attached to their name. So that means they may have an acceptable form of ID, but it's not on related or connected to their voter registration file. And then they don't have an ID, and those are the folks that reach out to us for assistance who need that help.
Yeah, I know there were a couple questions about the fact that, we're not totally sure we're reaching Democratic voters, as in the big D Democratic voters, that this, VoteRiders is working as a nonpartisan organization. So to answer those questions, we actually aren't sure. But again, I mean, I believe that we want all Americans to participate in the process. And hopefully by educating Americans, they will be pro-democracy voters, but we can't guarantee that. That's for sure. Okay, a few more questions for you. One is, Amy wanted to know, when we open the PDF letter from VoteRiders site and print those out and add our own message to the top, we put those in the mail with the addresses that are sent to us. She just wanted to confirm that that's what we're doing.
Yes, correct. Again, add that unique message at the top, and then you address the envelope to those addresses that you receive on your PDF. Stamp them, of course, and then send them out the door and make sure that they're on the way to either Arizona or Florida.
Great. Okay. And sorry about that. I just want to make sure that we, yes, we will definitely be having, you're going to be having more letter writing parties, right? That we can join if everyone starts following you at VoteRiders, or sign up for your newsletters. You do great newsletters too. I get them.
Yes, yes, and that's how you'll find out about that information. We'll be doing those throughout the month of July. We'll continue letter writing all the way up until our cutoff time will be in probably mid-October. We haven't set a firm date for that, but we're going to continue our letter writing campaign into these key states, making sure voters are prepared. We usually hold those events on Thursdays. We've started planning those for the month of July. We're going to have some, I believe, each of those Thursdays, those first 3 Thursdays. So next Thursday on the 7th, the 14th, and 21st, we're going to have volunteer events, whether that's letter writing. 2 of those, I believe, will be letter writing. 1 may be a text bank as well. And then we may have something coming up on the 28th as well with another one of our partner organizations. So there's going to be a lot of chances to write letters in July, and they're going to continue throughout the election cycle.
Okay, terrific. And yes, I strongly urge everyone to sign up to get the VoteRiders newsletters, because they're really great. Alicia wants to ask, when writing the letters to Arizona in particular, do you think it's important to add the dates by which they need to register? Really, I think any voter might appreciate those dates. Is that on the letter itself, Sylvester, or do writers include it?
Yes, we asked the writers to include that. So again, if you go to our website, voteriders.org/letter info, you'll find a link that has those key election dates. And then you just incorporate which ones you think are most impactful, whether the last day to make sure that they're registered, the first day that they can early vote, or when you have to send in your absentee ballot, whatever you think will be impactful for those voters. Those are the dates that you can add to the different letters that you're sending out.
Great. Okay. And Sylvester, remind us, just as an example of the hurdles to voter ID, or I'm sorry, not an example of the hurdles of voter ID, but remind us how states like Texas and Georgia in particular have really limited students attending colleges and university in those states to participate as citizens in those states?
Great question. And so, as we mentioned, voter ID is obviously different across the states. In Texas and Georgia specifically, they have different laws when it comes to student IDs. In Texas, student IDs aren't an acceptable form of ID when folks are voting. So that's unfortunate when you have so many young voters that may be in college, that college or junior college or technical school, and they're not able to use that ID. But the other things in Texas may be acceptable, like a gun license per se. So unfortunately for younger voters, they're not able to use that student ID in Texas. Here in Georgia, our ID law is a little bit different. Some student IDs are accepted in the state of Georgia. Those are student IDs when they come from a public university or a public technical school or a public junior college. Private institutions here in the state of Georgia, students in that enrolled in those schools would not be able to use their ID. So I always give the example because Atlanta has so many universities. If someone went to Georgia Tech, went to Georgia State, they would not be able, or they would be able to use their ID when they wanted to vote. But if they went to school like Emory, which is right down the road, if they went to one of the schools in the AUC, which is the cluster of HBCUs here in Atlanta, they went to Morehouse, Clark Atlanta, or Spelman, those IDs would not be acceptable as well. So Georgia publishes a list of all of the schools, public universities that they would accept IDs from, and then all those private institutions in Atlanta and across the state of Georgia, you would not be able to use your ID to vote.
Enraging. And I think we have one last question. Sylvester, are you partnering with Working America?
I'm not sure. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of partners across the United States.
Yeah, you have a lot.
yes, and they all work with us in different capacities. But I'm not sure if we're partnering with them. We have not partnered with them on a letter writing party or outreach like that yet. So if anyone's asking because they want to connect us or possibly want to do an event, please reach out to us, volunteer at VoteRiders.org. We definitely want to engage in that capacity with them and make sure that we're getting more letters into these key states.
Great. And Olivia just put that link in the chat. So if folks want to go to your website and see all your partners, just click on that. That's great. Well, listen, I think everyone wants to get cracking on their letter writing, and you know, Sylvester, we're just so excited and honored to be partnering with you on this very important effort. And as Sylvester said, we will be expanding our states, and coming in July will be Wisconsin. So we will have 2 more tent talks in July focused on Wisconsin. Our dates are TBD, but we will, as soon as we have those invites, we're doing some research on great grassroots organizations in Wisconsin. So as soon as we have those dates, we will send out the invites to everyone. So we hope you'll join us for those talks. We are moving them down to 9:30 in the morning, which we know is a little hard on our West Coast friends, but we're just thinking it might make it easier for the rest, you know, the East Coasters, if we can get this wrapped up in the morning. And again, I just want to remind everyone, July 13th at 7 is journalist and author Michael Lewis. August 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Pod Save America founder Dan Pfeiffer. And I'm sure we all watched the bombshell hearing yesterday when a very, very brave young woman, Cassidy Hutchinson, testified, and so many men twice her age refused to. And there will be more hearings in July. So again, it's so important to let your reps know that you support the work of the January 6th committee, and make sure you encourage all your friends and family to watch, record, share. It's we must hold those accountable for the atrocities on January 6th. Thank you so much for coming to Big Tent, everyone. Write those letters, request more. Again, Sylvester, thank you so much. We're just so thrilled to be working with you. And everyone stay well, stay safe. We'll see you soon under the tent.